Welcome to Pedagogic Approaches and Theories on Training Intercultural Competence. In this element, we work with two items. The first is reflection as an important part in the intercultural learning process, and we continue in another presentation with a transformative learning theory and how this theory gives deeper cultural understanding. But why is reflection important? Reflection in intercultural learning is important, as reflection in many studies is found to create deep learning, which is exactly what we need in a cultural learning process. Deep learning is characterized as a personal commitment to understand what you are concerned with. It's a process where you read more in order to combine, relate, integrate, and synthesize new information to prior learning. This makes you able to discuss in a nuanced way, which again gives meaning to what you may be working with. Reflection is thus, as Rogers called, a meaning-making process that moves a learner from one experience into the next with deeper understanding of its relationships with and connections to other experiences and ideas. It is what they call a systematic, rigorous, disciplined way of thinking, and it happens when you are in interactions with others. It requires that you as a person value personal and intellectual growth of yourself and of others. Students involved in the European nursing module use reflection during and after their exchange period. They use the described tool Reflective Diary that's based on Kolb's Learning Circle, and they attend reflective sessions where they reflect together with an intercultural facilitators and peer students. Dewey says, we do not learn from experience, we learn from reflecting on experience. And Gio Di Francesco says, reflection is a key element in a transformative nature of the learning experience. When we meet students for reflective processes, they might bring different ideas and reflections with them, if they bring any at all. They might bring different models because that's what they have met. They might have different experiences from none to reflection as an internalized process of learning. They might have different understandings of what is important or refer to different values in the reflective process. Now follows 5 different models of reflections, briefly presented to give you an idea of what students might bring with them and what models you might want to use in your work with students intercultural learning process. Or you can even make a combination of these different models. In Kolb's experimental learning circle, reflection is an integrated part of the learning process. In the reflection, you move from proximity to distance, you're active and experiencing something, and then you step back and observe and reflect. I'll give you an example. A student experienced that her patient was angry, very angry. She felt really upset and she found it very difficult to be with this patient. She felt insecure and she also felt tested by the patient. Afterwards, the student felt bad about the situation and she started to feel vulnerable at work. She also felt bad about not being able to help the patient because in the end she avoided contact. Then she decided to talk to her supervisor about it, and together they reflected on the whole situation. She realized then that she actually had some knowledge and theories on psychology and cultural differences that could help her to understand the patient's anger. She had until then only focused on her own feelings and the fact that she didn't understand the situation. After reflecting on the situation, with help of her supervisor, she managed to develop a good relation with the patient when she finally met her again. What happened was that she had an experience. She made some observations, and she was motivated to try to understand with the help of her supervisor. She also reactivated previous experience and knowledge, and then she assessed the situation in a whole new light. Then she tried again with the patient with the new understanding that she had achieved. She had a new experience, and she could make new reflections and feedback on what actually happened. This model of John's also start with an experience where you describe it and reflect on it. But it also draws on influencing factors as valuable factors to dwell on in order to learn. The influencing factors can be the context that you're in, or other internal or external factors. They can color a situation in a way that might not be obvious at first glance. By understanding what influence they actually have on the decision making, might make the student more knowledgeable. This is a short introduction to Schoen's reflection in action and on action. The focus of this model is the relationship between academic knowledge defined by universities and the acquisition of clinical competence in practice. The reflection in action happens when you need to make an adjustment of actions on the spot. You do it using your experience and the knowledge that you have already. When you go to reflection on action, that happens after an experience to better understand what happened. Here you may include new knowledge and new information if needed. Some, like Kolb, will say that it's very difficult to reflect while acting, especially when you are forced to act here and now, as you quite often is in nursing. In Schoen's interpretation, it also involves stepping back and rethink in the situation, but it might only take a minute. It is a creative, intuitive, and often tacit process. Gibbs' reflective circle. After the description of an experience, the student focuses on feelings, which is meant that the student tries to identify his or her own reactions to an event, which is very important in a cultural learning process. Then an evaluation of the positive and negative aspects of the experience is made. And in the sense-making analysis being the next step, the student use published knowledge to better understand the whole situation in order to conclude and to use this new understanding in upcoming actions. So there's an emphasis on feeling in Gibbs' reflective circle. The last model is the DIEB model, or the DEEP model. It's the model that you met in Unit 1, and it is already uploaded on Moodle, where you can read more about it. We recognize the steps from Kolb's learning circle, but here again with a clear focus on feelings, interpretation, and evaluation. You can choose any of the models or a combination of them as a way to structure your reflections with the students. Guided reflective questions can also be a way to help you with your reflective sessions. It's a good idea to ask them to describe the situation by simply asking them what happened or what did you do. If you reflect on the feelings of the situation, it could be questions like, how did you feel in the situation? What did it do to you? Why do you think you feel this way? In an intercultural learning process, it is quite often the students have a lot of feelings involved in what's going on. Thoughts is when you want to bring some more knowledge into the reflection, and what did you think while in the situation? That could be reflection on action after a situation where the students had done some reflection in action. What professional thoughts do you have about the situation? Asking them to bring in some of their previous knowledge, and also to ask them why these thoughts. In a reflective session, you interpret the situations together with the students and discuss it. And questions could be like, what makes you ask that? Tell me a bit more. What would you have answered now that we have discussed all this? And how did you reach that conclusion? What is your answer actually based on? What do you think your peer would have answered? Or a question like, why do you think this situation developed as it did? Sometimes a theory practice analysis would be a good thing as well. And the question could be like, to what do you make a connection here? How do you think you can use this? And do you recognize this from previous situations? And how can this be useful to you in the future? Questions for the learning process could be things like, where are you right now? What made an impression? Why did it make an impression? What do you find most interesting? And what do you find most peculiar? And what do you want to learn? So these questions could help you in the reflective process. When you reflect with your students, remember to bring in the knowledge that you have had and the experience also from Unit 1 and Unit 2. The last slide is just some references. Thank you for listening. Bye.